When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Griff YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be hitting some Arianne topics and questions. I had you guys submit some of these about a week and a half ago. And so we're going to be talking about Arianne in the Winds of Winter. And we're going to be doing a, guided discussion as usual. Again, if you guys do want to be a part of these discussions, follow the Instagram. I put those out way before I actually do the videos. And also subscribe here because I put out community posts for those. So if you want to be part of these, answer in those. And let's get into the actual video. So before we get into Winds of Winter, I do want to tackle some questions people have that actually kind of relate to things that are either happening before Winds of Winter or things that are going to be affecting things that she does in Winds of Winter. So Ashley asks, who foiled the Queen Maker plot with Myrcella by informing on her to Prince Doran? Personally, I think each of Arianne's friends told on her and are all spying for her father. Just like how all of Ramsay Bolton's friends are spying on him for Roose. Plus, if the Dornish and the Northmen are supposed to be mirrors of each other, it makes sense that Doran and Roose treat their children the same to an extent. I've talked about this before, and I've actually made a video on this if you are interested, but I personally think it was Tyene. I just think the way she's described, the way she's posed as the most dangerous of all of the Sand Snakes, the way that Arianne thinks about Tyene in this regard of like, Tyene is the person she trusts more than anyone, and yet we've seen Tyene being someone that you probably shouldn't trust. I think a lot of signs point to her. I think it also, again, it's a little bit of personal bias because I also think that Septa Lemore is like Tyene's mother, and so that would connect really well with that. But I actually like this idea as well, that it's not just one person, right? And so that's why Doran doesn't tell her, because it's actually a mixture of all of them. And how much would that break Arianne, realizing that all of her friends are not trustworthy, right? Like she has really nobody. Like that is a very crippling thing to think about. And so I like the idea, Ashley, but I think for me it's just Tyene. Lumbo asks, only a statement, but Arianne is a baddie. And to that, I can agree 100%. Like, if there was a person that I would want to marry in A Song of Ice and Fire, she's the closest to my age, and also she's just a very attractive woman, basically how she's described. But I also have somebody else I wanted to put up because, again, there's another comment that I had. But from Dorito, they say smash or pass, and I guess from what you can just hear what I said, definitely smash. So let's get into some more questions. Metal Maz, or just Maz, asks, do you think Arianne will notice any Martell features or lack thereof in young Griff? So this is a tough one because the original Aegon, again, he was very young, so you can't really take too much out of his features, but from his young age, he is described as taking after Rhaegar, having more of the silver hair Targaryen features. And so I think young Griff's appearance is going to add up with kind of what Aegon was as a baby. So I think Arianne will not notice many of those Dornish features. I think he'll be more like a Targaryen or a Valyrian because that's kind of how he's been raised. And so if it's going to be any of those, I would say lack thereof traits of the Martell in him. Another question that I think is interesting that Maz points out, so I'm going to ask this one as well because I think it relates really well, but what's the ultimate reason for her being the one going to treat with Aegon VI? No marriage proposal was brought up by either side, and it seems foolish for Doran to use his heir as a pawn or bait. So again, I think Doran is trying to find what is going on in this playing field, and the issue that Doran runs into is there's not really anyone he can trust with this, right? Like, he needs someone like Arianne, someone that he can put all of his faith into, as well as Arianne has shown that she's very cunning. She can be very clever when it comes to deceiving men in general. You look at young Griff's age, it's going to play into Arianne really well. And so I think what Doran is trying to do is realizing, they've had no word from the Dany stuff. Quentyn could likely be dead or missing or whatnot. I think that's a realization that Doran has to kind of come to. And so he's trying to see what the playing field is like, right? Because I think Doran's patience is running out, right? He's seeing how weak Westeros is at this point, and he sees this opportunity now to finally get his vengeance for his family. And so I think he sends Arianne for almost a couple reasons. The first reason is, yes, I think Arianne is going to be able to manipulate better terms if the Dornish do ally with young Griff, but I think there is a part of it in Doran's mind that if Arianne can manipulate or even get young Griff to fall in love with her, that's a really big power position, right? It's a little incesty. Not a little, it is incesty. But for the Dornish, it puts them back on the throne, right? It basically goes back to you have a kid that was, again, allegedly from Elia. If that's not the case, you still wrap the Dornish back into it anyway. And so I think that is why Doran ends up sending Arianne. But I agree. I think it's very risky. It's a very risky proposition. Crossland asks, will she attempt to seduce young Griff? And if so, how effective do you think it will be? How much of a power grab will this give Dorne in Aegon's court? I think it's going to give quite a lot. I think, for the most part, think about what Aegon's court is right now. Aegon's court right now is mainly the Golden Company. If the Dornish are the first actual Westerosi allies to join them, they're going to hold a lot of influence. And when you already think about young Griff has a lot of favor with the Dornish because, or young Griff is going to favor the Dornish quite a lot because his mother, again, from what he's been told and what he believes he is Dornish. And so I think what we saw with someone like Baelor Breakspear or Daeron the Good and his reign is something we're going to see almost again, which is, again, I think going to be very ironic, right? Given the fact that the reason the Blackfires lost had a lot to do with the Dornish in that first rebellion. And so if young Griff does trace his ancestry back to the first Daemon Blackfire, it's almost going to be ironic because you're going to see like a switch, right? That's going to be something I think is very interesting. Also, think about the way things are kind of setting up, right? Like, because if you also think about it, right, it was the Dornishmen and the Stormlanders, and think about where Aegon is right now. He has allegedly taken Storm's End, the Stormlander castle. So if young Griff is a Blackfire, it's interesting because he's already taken vengeance on the Stormlanders and gotten the Dornish to be his allies. All of the things that defeated Daemon Blackfire the first time. So I think that's going to be very interesting. It's a nice little spin, and it's something that's just a little nod to the history of House Blackfire if young Griff is a Blackfire. So getting into the Winds of Winter, Andrew asks, how likely is it that George keeps her first two Winds of Winter chapters as is? Could he possibly combine her first two chapters with the book publisher's set page count limits? Yeah, I think it is very logical to actually do so. I think the two could be combined into, and just taking out some of the filler in those chapters and putting them together, I think could make a lot of sense. But yeah, I think that's a good idea, Andrew, and I think George could possibly do that. And that's why I always say, like, when we do these Winds of Winter predictions in which we are taking stuff from the sample chapters, you have to keep it with a grain of salt because George can at any point change anything in those, right? Like, those are not set in stone. They were samples. They were testing the waters and giving us what George has written, right? Something he's not really doing anymore, but it's kind of showing that, oh yeah, this is generally what he wants to do, but this could always be subject to change. And one small detail could be massive, right? Like, that is really huge because us figuring out that Storm's End has been taken happens in the Arion chapters and these sample chapters. So what if those change? How does that change the timelines and stuff like that? So again, I think it's a very interesting idea, but I do think that could be really cool. So moving on, Hatim asks, what is her impact? Will she be like a player or a chess piece for others, queen or pawn? I think Arianne will try to be a queen type because I think she's going to be manipulating young Griff quite a lot. And so I think what you're going to end up seeing is the two people wrestling for power over young Griff is going to be JonCon and Arianne. Because JonCon, I think, will see a lot of what needs to be done. And I think Arianne will be trying to do what is beneficial for her family and the Dornish and give them more power. And so I think Arianne could also see JonCon as a tool that needs to be removed. So if Arianne, for instance, let's say she is the one that discovers that JonCon has grayscale, that could be huge because Arianne could get him kicked out of the castle or city just like that, wherever he is at the time when Arianne figures it out. That could be really big, right? And so that could be an interesting like plot point with Arianne as a character. But yeah, I think Arianne has been set up in a similar manner to like Sansa, where she is going to be kind of a player of the Game of Thrones. Moving on. Matthew asks, simple one, does she make it out of Winds? I think she will die in the sack of King's Landing in A Dream of Spring. I do not think Arianne will die in Winds of Winter. I do think when Dany comes over, I think she will definitely be a person that dies during that. But I don't think in the sack of King's Landing. I'd be interested to see why you believe so, because you would think Arianne would be way out of the fighting, unless you're assuming that Cersei is maybe still, held up and she lights some sort of wildfire that kills a lot of young Griff's camp or some of his people that are valuable to him. I'm not sure how she would die in the sack, though. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Mercedes asks, not directly tied to Arianne, but possibly, who is going to rule Dorne by the ends of winter/spring? This is a very interesting question, because I think the Martells, for the most part, the major ones, are going to be wiped out. I think that could be an interesting spin on it. It's like they've waited all of these years to get their vengeance, and Doran makes one wrong move in supporting young Griff over Dany, and that gets his family killed. So I think Doran is a character that I definitely think could see, if Arianne and Quentyn and Trystane, all these characters die, I think he could be someone that ends up maybe taking his own life or being killed by the Dornish people because of his bad leadership and or action, because he's already not very liked in Dorne. And so who comes up after that? And that's where you come to a weird position, because there is no real person that you would say, oh yeah, this is who we'd point to as being the leader. Again, the Ironwoods have a lot of sway. The Danes have a lot of sway. There's a lot of sways. You can look at the Sand Snakes, some of the bastards of House Martell. That could be possible. I think a character I would really love to see be the leader of Dorne. I don't know if this is going to happen, because she's not exactly in the line of succession at all for Dorne. But we know that Dorne allows women to be the leader, and so I would really like Ellaria Sand to be the leader. She is someone that seems really perfect for Dorne, as in ruling it. She is someone that's very smart. She is someone that can be very manipulative. She's an attractive woman. She plays the Game of Thrones really well in King's Landing, but she also is someone that doesn't look at vengeance the way it happens in the show. She is someone kind of willing to live and forget, right? And so I really like the character of Ellaria. But I want to do a quote from Ellaria, because this to me perfectly understands why I think she should be the ruler of Dorne, and I would really like to see her do that. Oberyn wanted vengeance for Elia. Now the three of you want vengeance for him. I have 4 daughters, I remind you. Your sisters. My Elia is 14, almost a woman. Obella is 12, on the brink of maidenhood. They worship you, as Doria and Loreza worship them. If you should die, must El and Obella seek vengeance for you, then Doria and Lori for them? Is that how it goes round and round forever? I ask again, where does it end? I saw your father die. Here is his killer. Can I take a skull to bed with me to give me comfort in the night? Will it make me laugh, write me songs, care for me when I am old and sick? This perfectly explains who Ellaria is as a person, and I think it really would be great for the leadership of Dorne as we're moving forward into this new time where we're hoping for more peace. We're hoping for stopping all of this, right? All these family issues that cause massive civil wars. Ellaria would be a great person to start that new age of A Song of Ice and Fire and of Westeros. And so I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on that idea. But yeah, so for right now, I would say Ellaria is a candidate that I would really campaign for and I would love to see as their leader. Aegor asks, how happy of a marriage could she have with the man, the myth, the legend, young Griff? I think she could have a really happy one, given that young Griff seems like he's a good kid for the most part. He seems very attractive. He seems like a ladies' man for the most part. I think there could be a happy marriage until Dany comes over and then she completely nukes them and then, not so happy anymore because you're dead. But, or maybe they die lovers and so it's not that bad. Maybe it's like a Jaime Cersei type thing where they're getting killed by bricks, where it's like, oh, well, they're at least they're in each other's arms. You're all welcome for reminding you of season 8, by the way. And so that is all of the questions and or statements that I had about Arianne in Winds of Winter or Dream of Spring. But I want to kind of give a broad overview of where I think the character is going. So I think Arianne, is mainly going to be used as this piece to bring the Dornish and Aegon together. I think Arianne's going to take it a step forward and also get a marriage alliance with them, so marrying with young Griff. I think young Griff is going to really like that because I think he's going to find Arianne very attractive. I think Arianne is going to seduce him pretty well, and again, I don't think the incest thing is going to come up, right? Because the Targaryens and young Griff believing that he is a Targaryen, they wed their own family all the time. I don't think he's going to see that as some big thing. If he likes her, he's going to marry her. And so I think that's going to be detrimental. I think that is going to be the point that we look at and we go, that was where young Griff lost. Right there. Because young Griff basically making himself a married man is detrimental to his campaign. Because when Dany comes over, there's now no chance. There's no chance of any type of marriage, right? Could he do something like Aegon the Conqueror, marry Dany and Arianne? He definitely has the power to do so, but would Dany go for it? I don't think so, because not only would she be sharing the throne with young Griff, but also Arianne. That's not something Dany's going to do. And so when we look at Robb Stark, as for instance, as a character, when he marries Jane Westerling, it destroys his campaign. That right there is kind of what I'm talking about with young Griff. And so Arianne is going to be kind of seen as this character that's, I think, is going to be fighting a lot for power with Aegon's camp. And I think it's going to end up blowing up in her face when Dany comes over and destroys young Griff's reign and her as well, and leaving the Martell dynasty, or I guess legacy, quite tarnished as a whole. But thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.